for me, if I didn't have to be famous and I could do the same roles, I would rather not be famous.
Please welcome Chadwick Boseman.
He was extremely in control of his ability to focus. You know what I'm saying?
I can't think of an actor who would be considered more irreplaceable, less dispensable, more absolutely necessary right now than Chadwick Boseman.
I root for everybody because I know if they do well, the truth is, it presents an opportunity for me.
He was a king on the screen, a warrior of screen, and a legend in silence. He brought to life heroes like Jackie Robinson,
give me something I can hit,
James Brown,
get up,
and Thurgood Marshall. But behind every powerful performance was a man fighting a battle no one saw. This is the story of Chadwick Boseman, his life, his art, his impact, and the legacy he left behind. Chadwick Aaron Boseman was born on November 29, 1976 in Anderson, South Carolina. He grew up in a close-knit working-class family. His mother was a nurse and his father worked in a textile factory while also running an upholstery business. From an early age, Chadwick was surrounded by hard work, faith, and community, a foundation that would stay with him for the rest of his life. Before the red carpet, before Wakanda, before even the world knew his name, there was a teenage boy in Anderson, South Carolina, holding a pen, trying to make sense of grief. Chadwick Boseman was in his junior year at T.L. Hanna High School when a tragedy struck close to home. A friend and a teammate was shot and killed, an act of violence that stunned the community and silenced the halls of his school. However, silence didn't sit well with Chadwick. While others mourned quietly, he picked up his pen, he poured his confusion, his questions, and his pain into a play titled Crossroads. It wasn't just a school project, it was a memorial, a protest, and a prayer all in one. He didn't just write the play, he directed it. He gathered his classmates, staged rehearsals, and turned the school's modern stage into a space for healing. That moment was the spark, not for acting, but for storytelling. Chadwick didn't want to be seen, he wanted to say something. Even then, he believed in the power of art to confront injustice, to make sense of suffering, and to change the way we see each other. That spark took him to Howard University in Washington, D.C., a school known as the Mecca of Black excellence. There, Chadwick majored in directing.
You know, Howard was one of the schools that was created after slavery to sort of catch the enslaved African up with the rest of the country. Its purpose was to create teachers and ministers to improve the African American situation. I think a similar thing sort of probably happened with me at Howard as a theater student, because you as a theater student would be taught Shakespeare and Pinter and Beckett, and when I went to study in Oxford, I studied those things.
Sure.
He had no interest in being a star. His dream was to tell stories that mattered from behind the camera, but destiny had other plans.
I was only 20.
It is not often that one so young has such a giant intellect.
At Howard, Chadwick met one of his most important mentors, Felicia Rashad. Yes, Claire Huxtable's from The Cosby Show.
And if you don't get it together and drop these macho attitudes, you are never gonna have anybody bringing you anything, anywhere, any place, anytime, ever.
But more than that, she was a trained actress, a teacher, and a first believer in her students' potential.
He was always interested in language and what it does, and how to arrange it in such a way as to move people inside themselves.
She saw something in Chadwick, his quiet strength, his discipline, his depth. And she pushed him to explore acting, not as a career move, but as a way to understanding what it means to lead, to feel, and to speak truth with your whole being.
If God can do anything, can he make a stone so heavy that he can't lift it?
Of course.
But if he can do anything, he can lift the stone.
Then came a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. In 1998, Chadwick and a few other Howard students were accepted into the British American Drama Academy's prestigious summer program at Oxford University. It was a dream, but it came with a price tag that many of them, including Chadwick, couldn't afford.
The great Phylicia Rashad, she suggested that we take this classical training course in Oxford, and it costs quite a bit of money. And so she then basically went to her friends and was like, you know, I have a group of like 9 students and they need some benefactors.
Wow.
And none of us really knew who paid for us because they did it anonymously. Then later on, I received a letter that said, this is your benefactor. So I was like, what? To see Denzel Washington's name on there.
But I understand from Chadwick Boseman himself that you in some way are actually responsible for him being Black Panther.
I'm gonna screw this story up, but Phylicia Rashad was helping kids, and she called different people, and she called me, and I said, yeah, I'll sponsor wherever, and she said, well, you're sponsoring, or he called to thank me. That's how I found out it was him. You're sponsoring this kid, some Chadwick Boseman guy. And I said, yeah, okay, Chad, I want my money back.
Without fanfare, Denzel agreed to cover the full tuition for Chadwick and several other students. He never made it public. For him, it wasn't about the headlines. It was about lifting the next generation. Years later, in 2018, Chadwick would stand before Denzel at the American Film Institute tribute and say with full gratitude,
There is no Black Panther without Denzel Washington.
And he meant it. That scholarship didn't just send Chadwick to Oxford. It gave him the training, the exposure, and the belief that he belonged in the highest realm of art and excellence. Before the cameras rolled, before the Marvel universe expanded, Chadwick Boseman was already learning how to carry greatness with humility, with purpose, and in silence. Chadwick didn't burst into Hollywood with a big bang. There were no shortcuts, no viral breakthroughs, no big breaks that changed everything overnight. He took the long way in. After Oxford, after Howard, and after years of rigorous stage training, Chadwick moved to Brooklyn with the quiet determination of someone who believed in craft over cloud. He supported himself by teaching acting to kids in Harlem, mentoring them the same way he had been mentored, not for fame but for purpose. Acting wasn't just a job to him, it was service to humanity. In the early 2000s, he began showing up on the screen, in episodes of Law & Order, CSI, NY, Cold Case, and ER. One day, he'll be a grieving brother, the next, a criminal suspect. Blink and you might miss him. But every time he brought depth, he turned even the smallest roles into portraits of humanity. He wasn't just delivering lines, he was listening, learning, sharpening his instincts, and laying the bricks. But Hollywood had its shadows, and Chadwick saw them early. One of his first major TV gigs was on the soap opera All My Children. He was cast as Reggie Potter, a troubled teen from the street. But something felt off. The character leaned heavily on harmful stereotypes, angry, uneducated, and violent.
Damn right, I can take care of myself.
Yeah, we can all see that.
But I don't need your charity.
No, you may not need that, but what you do need is to be examined.
Never judge the characters you play. That's what we were always taught. That's the first rule of acting. And any role play, honestly, can be empowering. But I was conflicted because this role seemed to be wrapped up in assumptions about us as Black folk.
Chadwick pushed back. He didn't demand fame. He demanded dignity. The showrunners didn't like it. He was fired. He stood for dignity even when he had little power in the room. For some, that would have been the end. But for Chadwick, it was only the beginning of a lifelong refusal to accept roles that disrespected Black identity. Interestingly, his replacement on All My Children was another young actor, Michael B. Jordan, who would later become his rival turned brother in Black Panther. By 2008, something shifted. Chadwick landed a role in sports biopic The Express, playing Floyd Little, a real-life Syracuse football star. It wasn't a huge part, but it was a meaningful one. It marked the beginning of a pattern. Chadwick stepping into shoes of real men who broke barriers, who carried the weight, and who mattered. He wasn't chasing roles, he was answering calls that fit his mission. And while the world still didn't know his name, it was beginning to feel his presence. Because Chadwick Boseman wasn't just building a resume, he was building a reputation for integrity, for preparation, and for a quiet intensity that wouldn't stay quiet much longer. Behind the scene, he was still writing and directing. He didn't see acting as the goal, but as a part of a larger mission. And what was the mission? Telling meaningful stories. In 2013, Chadwick Boseman stepped into the cleats of a legend, Jackie Robinson. the man who broke Major League Baseball's color barrier. 42 wasn't just a sports biopic, it was a test of range, grit, and restraint, and Chadwick Boseman delivered. He didn't play Robinson as a symbol, he played him as a man. Flawed, fiery, scared, and determined.
Hey, fellas, I'm a ball player. All right, I'm here to play ball.
So am I. I'm here to win.
In one scene, after being taunted by a racist manager, Jackie breaks down in a tunnel. That moment wasn't in the original script. Chadwick suggested it. It made the film human. It made the legend real. Hollywood took notice. Then came Get On Up in 2014. This time, he was the godfather of soul, James Brown. The transformation was electric. Chadwick didn't just act, he danced, moved, and spoke like Brown.
And why in the world are we here, Bobby?
You came to play, James.
You're here because they want you here, James. You're James Brown. I want you here.
And he did all of his own dancing. Every spin, every shuffle, every slide, it was all pure commitment. Where 42 was restrained, Get On Up was wild, unpredictable, genius.
What would you do? I said, what? Good God.
He was constantly wanting respect and demanding respect.
Just like James Brown himself. Again, Chadwick took on a complex black icon and again he nailed it. In 2017, he became America's first black Supreme Court justice in Marshall. But instead of telling the whole life story, the film focused on one case early in Thurgood Marshall's career, when he was still proving himself.
See you boys another time.
Chadwick showed us Marshall's brilliance, but also his vulnerability. A man who had to argue law in a world stacked against him. It was another reminder that Chadwick Boseman didn't pick roles for fame, he picked them for purpose.
It's Thurgood Marshall like you've never seen him before. The new movie Marshall chronicles a pivotal case in his career before he won the landmark Supreme Court case ending segregation and long before he became the High Court's first African-American justice 50 years ago.
But everything changed when he put on the crown.
How did you win this role? What went into that process?
You know, I had been thinking about the character because that's what actors do. You think about characters you might want to play. And I was on the set, I was on the red carpet actually in Zurich, and my agent called me, Marvel wants to talk to you. And I was like, really? And he was like, yeah. I said, I'm on the red carpet. He was like, well, you get off the red carpet. I got off and got in the car and drove around because it was a secret conversation. And they basically were like, hey, we heard there's this character that you're interested in.
Wow.
And heard from who? You know, and they were like, you know, if it's the character we think you're interested in, would you be interested in playing it? And I said, if it's the character I think you're talking about, yes. And I didn't know whether they were talking about Popeye the Sailor Man, but I was like, yeah, anything you do, I'm good with.
Chadwick Boseman first appeared in the Marvel Cinematic Universe in Captain America: Civil War. It was a film packed with big personalities: Iron Man, Captain America, Black Widow. But when Chadwick stepped onto the screen as the Prince of Wakanda, something changed. He didn't shout, he didn't grandstand. His power was in his stillness, his quiet confidence, his every word measured, every movement intentional. He didn't act like a king, he embodied one. And then came the year 2018.
And whenever you're ready, go ahead and tell Chadwick what he and the movie mean to you.
Darren here, just want to say thank you so much for making Black Panther. I can't express how much it means to me and the community and my family. Thank you from the very bottom of my heart for all that you've done, for really being a hero that we really need in a time like this. Thank you so much.
Darren, I think there's something wrong with your microphone.
Oh my God.
Black Panther didn't just arrive in theaters. It detonated. It shattered box office records, soared past $1 billion worldwide, and became the first superhero film to earn a Best Picture nomination at the Oscars. But Black Panther was more than a blockbuster. It was a cultural revolution.
For me, it was the fact that as a person of African descent, this searching for what my real culture is.
For the first time, African culture wasn't a backdrop or an afterthought. It was the heart of the story. Wakanda wasn't colonized, broken, or begging for help. It was advanced, sovereign, and stunning. It was what Africa could be, unshackled by history. And at the center of it all was Chadwick Boseman. T'Challa was a different kind of hero. He wasn't driven by revenge or ego. He was thoughtful, burdened, wise beyond his years. A son mourning his father, a ruler learning to lead, a man balancing tradition with change. And Chadwick played him with royal gravity, like someone who understood that this role wasn't just acting. It was inheritance. It was a battle for dignity, a battle for representation, and a battle for hope.
Like, there's a certain patriotism to something that is never been lost. It's ancient. And being able to hold on to that, it was something that throughout the movie, I was like, wow, the weight of that is something that I have to convey to the world.
Representation matters not just as an African American, but also as a woman. The warriors in this are equal, male and female. The treatment of people is equal, black, white, whatever. And that is something long coming. When you can see yourself as a hero, then you can see yourself succeeding and moving forward into the future.
Across continent, across cultures, the world felt it. In African villages and American classrooms, in theaters in Lagos and Los Angeles, children saw a king who looked like them. A superhero who didn't hide behind a mask, but led with his face uncovered, his voice unshaken and his purpose clear. Chadwick wasn't just playing T'Challa. He was offering the world a version of black excellence that rarely seen on the screen, one that didn't apologize or assimilate, one that stood tall. He became more than a star. He became a symbol of pride, a symbol of strength, and a symbol of what's possible. And through it all, he wore that mantle with the same grace, humility, and fire that had carried him from a high school stage in South Carolina to the throne of Wakanda. Even as his body was battling in silence, Chadwick Boseman was still giving the world everything.
Money is about wow. Every time I walk out my front door, see cops patrolling my neighborhood like it's some kind of police set, I can feel just how much I ain't worth.
In The Five Blood, he appeared as Tommy Norman, the fallen leader of a squad of Black War veterans. He wasn't in the film for long, but his presence haunted, like a ghost of what could have been. His scenes felt spiritual, even prophetic, like he knew something we didn't. And then came his final performance, Rainey's Black Bottom. In that film, he played Levi Green, a fiery, ambitious trumpet player, clashing with history, racism, and his own pain. Chadwick poured himself into the role, the rage, the laughter, the desperation. You can feel the ache in his body, in every trembling line. He wasn't just a man playing on the edge, he was living it. What the world didn't know was that behind the camera, Chadwick was dying. Back in 2016, the very same year he was introduced as T'Challa in Captain America: Civil War, Chadwick had been diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer. A devastating private battle ensued. He told no one, not the public, not the studios, not even many of his co-stars. While fans celebrated his rise, while he stood tall on red carpets delivering inspiring speeches, performed intense stunts, and represented a generation on the screen, he was undergoing surgeries and chemotherapy. Still, he kept showing up. He filmed Marshall, Infinity War, Endgame, 21 Bridges, The Five Blood, Rainey's Black Bottom, trained, fought, danced, gave interviews, and in between takes, he visited children battling cancer, never letting them know he was fighting the same enemy.
Two little kids, Ian and Taylor, who recently passed from cancer. And throughout our filming, I was communicating with them, knowing that they were both terminal. And what they said to me is, and their parents said, they're trying to hold on till this movie comes. And when I found out that they,
take your time with it.
Yeah, it means a lot.
He could relate because he was also fighting the same battle.
Very tragic death sending shockwaves across the country. Actor Chadwick Boseman died at the age of 43 following a private 4-year battle with colon cancer.
He was a fighter in every sense of the word. He played strong characters on screen, but what many of us didn't know about was his cancer diagnosis and that he still kept working through surgeries and even chemo.
On August 28, 2020, Chadwick Boseman passed away at the age of 43 years old. The news came like a thunderclap, sudden, disorienting, and devastating. The world didn't know, his fans didn't know, his friends barely knew, and then all at once, the silence made sense. But in that silence, the world began to speak his name differently, not just as an actor, but as a moment, as a movement, as a mirror for Black excellence.
I can't believe that I was so lucky. I can't believe that I got to love this person, and I also got them to love me too.
Simone, you're with me every day. I have to acknowledge you right now. Love you.
Black Panther was no longer just a movie. It was hope, it was healing, it was proof that Black stories don't just belong in Hollywood. They lead it. In his honor, Howard University renamed its College of Arts after him. The same school where he walked in as a young storyteller now bears his name to inspire the next generation. Director Ryan Coogler said it best. He lived the way he walked, by giving everything. And in the end, that's exactly what Chadwick Boseman did. He gave us everything. And somehow, even now, he still is. He didn't live a long life, but he lived a full one. He reminded us that purpose is more important than popularity, that dignity matters more than spotlight, and that the truest heroes may never tell you they are hurting.
Everything that you fought for was not for yourself. It was for those that come after.
His legacy lives on.
In my culture, death is not the end.